Hello and welcome to the first, Patreon Q&A I've decided to do for July 2018. I've never done one of these before, but I figured it's about time because I get a lot of people asking me a lot of questions all the time, and I figured maybe I could kind of give back to my very, very generous patrons who are paying my rent. So I got a couple questions here that my patrons have asked me. I don't know if I'm gonna make this video like public or just leave it unlisted on my Patreon. I'm not sure. And if my audio quality is not as good as my my videos are regularly, it's because I normally record with a really heavy blanket over my head just to cut out some of the reverberation. So my mic's a little my gain on my mic is a little higher, just so I don't have to like hunch over under an electric blanket. So yeah, with that, let's get into our first question. Our first question is from Charlie Heberer. I hope I'm saying your name right. Heberer. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go with Charlie Heberer, and it is: what non-movie, game, TV show, etc. soundtrack is your favorite? Huh. I probably should have looked at these questions before I did this. Okay. Favorite non-movie soundtrack, so this it kind of brings up the video game paradox, where with a video game, you're dealing with a different set of limitations with a film, and to some extent you're doing the same thing with a TV show. When it comes to a TV show as opposed to a film, the whole idea is that it runs indefinitely, right? So you want to have something that's as cheap as possible, that you could reproduce as many times as possible. A really good show that jumps to mind is something like South Park or The Simpsons. I went to Denver Comic Con and I went to a panel from the guys who created Phineas and Ferb, and they talked about like the creation of that show and how they're able to just pump show after show after show after show out. So with that comes another set of musical limitations. So when it comes to TV, it's really how you can maneuver a soundtrack to a TV show, not just the theme song. And the one thing I've constantly heard is that Lost has a good soundtrack. Apparently each of the characters has their own theme, their own leitmotif. It's just that show's like 9 seasons long. So I'm not really sure I could get to doing a whole video on all the characters and how all the music kind of comes together, but I'd really like to give it a shot. So tentatively I would say Lost, but not based on me seeing it, based off of what everybody else has seen it. Other than that, I can't really think of a TV show. Yeah. And then when it comes to a video game, you really gotta, it's not so much what the soundtrack is or how the soundtrack sounds so much as how it's implemented in the story or the playing of the game, basically. I mean, like right now, I could say that my favorite soundtrack is Journey. It came out when I was in college, and I really, really love it. Austin Wintory did a great job, and he really deserved that Grammy. He was robbed. Yeah, I would say Journey is my favorite soundtrack for a bunch of reasons. I keep saying I'm going to do a video on it, and then every time I play it, I'm like, this is really dense. I'm not sure I could get a whole video out on just this. I might give that a shot, actually. I might just like replay it. But yeah, my favorite video game soundtrack is probably Journey. I also really like Halo. And I used to play a lot of the Final Fantasies when I was a teenager. So I really like that Nobuo Uematsu sound. So yeah, those are my favorite soundtracks that I think I'll commit to right now. Again with Lost, I haven't gone through Lost with a fine-tooth comb. This is based off of what I keep reading other people saying, so I'll have to check that one out. All right, let's get to the next question. Donovan Hodges asks, how do you think pop music should be represented in film? For example, the first Guardians of the Galaxy has mainly diegetic pop music, while the second one was filled with a lot of non-diegetic uses of pop music. I personally feel like the use of pop music in a non-diegetic feels peculiar and takes me out of the film, while diegetic pop music makes more sense and doesn't remove me from the film. What do you think? I think oh god, that's a really big question. I think it really depends on the context, right? Like if your character's driving down the road and they turn on the radio and then a pop track starts playing, that makes a lot of sense to me. Whenever I hear, but I agree with you. Whenever I hear a piece of non-diegetic, okay, well, first we need to define diegetic and not diegetic. Diegetic is when something exists in the universe of the film. So diegetic music is when your character turns on a radio and then the radio starts playing. That's diegetic music that exists in the universe. Non-diegetic music is music that's like the soundtrack, right? Like everything that John Williams writes. So like in Solo, the Imperial March went from non-diegetic to diegetic, right? It was the soundtrack, the musical representation of the Empire and Darth Vader, and then in Solo, they made it the actual national anthem of the Empire or something like that, which let's just not get into that now. So yeah, I can say that with pop music, it definitely sucks me out. I kind of brought this up with the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad video, where when you have pop music, you don't really have control over how your audience has been exposed to it. So when I was watching Black Panther, there's a scene where they walk into a casino and The Weeknd starts playing. I think it's The Weeknd. I'm not sure, but they end up hearing it, and I remember constantly hearing it on the radio. And when I was in the movie theater, I very vividly being like, I remember hearing this in the car that one time when we were on that street. And it totally like sucked me out of the movie for a minute, you know. So yeah, I really agree with you there. I make this pretty clear in a lot of my videos. I have a lot of problems with pop music for a whole bunch of reasons. I actually just finished a book. Let me get it. You can tell this is a very professional video. Called The Song Machine Inside the Song Machine Inside the Hit Factory by John Seabrook. I just finished that book, and it was kind of like stunning because when you look at music critically, like from the old common practice period lens that I kind of put everything through, pop music is kind of just like a step below what they teach you in music school, and then you like actually break open how pop tunes are written and what they do and why people do them or why people write them the way that they write them, and it's like, wow, it's literally just written to sell as much as possible to teenagers, you know. And so if you're trying to do something deeper, if you're trying to like really tell a story musically speaking, pop music really, I don't understand why you would go that route outside of like, let's make this relatable for preteens so that we could sell movie tickets or something like that. You know what I mean? Like just to make money. Like with Guardians of the Galaxy, because you bring up Guardians of the Galaxy, and Guardians of the Galaxy 1, a lot of time you hear the music like when he's putting on headphones, which I get, but still like that's not a replacement for like character development. You know, they're trying to do shorthand, like, hey, he's from the 80s. All you guys from the 80s and remember the 80s, wasn't it great? And like, I'm not sure I'm totally on board with that. And then the second one has a lot of non-diegetic uses of pop music. I keep seeing it on Netflix, and I haven't rewatched the second one. I really want to get back into the second one because it definitely did some stuff that raised some questions for me. But yeah, like when you have non-diegetic pop music, what you're basically doing is you're putting pop music on the level of the music that's trying to tell a story, which is like another, like, okay, so then does this become a leitmotif? Is the pop tune the theme of the film? And it kind of fractures everything that I talk about that could potentially happen in a soundtrack by just jutting in this other piece of music that exists outside the realm of the film, you know? Yeah, and then this all comes back to Baby Driver. Everybody loves Baby Driver and keeps talking about Baby Driver and asking me about it, and I still haven't seen it because I know I'm not gonna like it. But yeah, it's a tough question because basically what we're talking about is, it's a tough question because basically we're asking how valuable is the music that we hear in the film? What is its purpose and what does it do? So if you just want something that's going to sound good that people are going to like, then just commit to pop music because it's going to be cheaper and make more money for you in the long run. But if we're talking about actually constructing a musical story, which is what I keep trying to advocate for on my channel, then using pop music is really just detrimental in general. That being said, I just saw a Reddit post where in Guardians 3, in Infinity War, they play Rubber Band Man for the Guardians. When they introduce the Guardians, it's Rubber Band Man. And someone was like, yeah, but what do rubber bands do? They snap. So it's like in Thanos Infinity Gauntlet snap. I thought that was cute. That was funny. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it was like, all right. But if that's why you include the track, that's a lot of money down the drain for a really obscure joke. But yeah, so it's all about intent and how people are perceiving the music that they want in their films, more or less. All right, so the next question is from Alan Leask. What kind of game would best fit having leitmotifs, or is it possible to use them in any type of game? So one of the problems that I have with my channel, and it's kind of like quote unquote the sideways paradox, is that I'm advocating for something that I can't find, right? Literal a leitmotif the way they were originally intended, like in a Wagnerian opera, is kind of specific. It's not just a theme, it's a theme that changes in a specific way for a specific reason. So, let's say you have, okay, so I'm thinking about World of Warcraft because one of the cities is about to get lit on fire. And let's say that the Horde is represented by one key signature and the Alliance is represented by another key signature, right? Everything that happens to do with these two sides has a key signature. Well, if your character has a theme, a motif, any piece of representative music, and that character switches from Horde to Alliance in the story for whatever reason, the key signature that their theme gets played in would change. So it's not just thematic transformation for the sake of transformation, it's transforming for a specific reason that has been established in your story, in your musical story. But it doesn't have to be a key signature. It could be articulation, it could be instrumentation, it could be a range, right? Maybe higher up instruments represent divinity and lower instruments represent like hell or something like that. And so when you have a theme that changes, it changes for a specific reason. And I really, really struggle to find that in contemporary soundtracks or really any soundtracks anywhere. But at the same time, looking at that off the top of my head, video games would be absolutely perfect to have these authentic leitmotifs, which is what I've been trying to say, which I don't really think a lot of people have been picking up on. Like you look at Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon, you can have each item have its own small musical phrase, and then as you collect items, you're basically writing a piece of music based off of the weapons or the items or the pickups that you get, right? So it kind of turns into like In C to the 10th power, right, by Terry Riley. You've got all these little fragments of music that play, and then just by listening to the track, you can say, oh, you've got this item, oh, and you've got that item, oh, and you've got this item, because they all have different instruments and they all have different patterns, right? Or you look at like a Final Fantasy turn-based RPG. I keep saying Final Fantasy because it's like the only JRPG I've ever played. But you look at like a turn-based JRPG where you can swap out your party members. You can have each party member have a different instrument and have it, you can have them all different, give them all your characters different instruments and layer them on top of each other, right? Horizontal resequencing, vertical reorchestration. So it'd be vertical reorchestration. Unless I get those backwards. I get those confused all the time. But you could layer the instruments on top of each other. And then your fight music would change based off of who's in your party. And then you can have the music change again depending on what enemies you're fighting, right? So you don't just have fight music, you have fight music that is representative of what's happening in your game. I really like Super Mario World because all the levels basically have the same music, right? But they're different depending on where you are. The music is slightly altered. The instrumentation's different. Something about it changes, but it's fundamentally the same music. You know what I'm saying? So that's a really, really good example of leitmotif. It would be better if there was a specific reason as to why it changed, like everything in the cave is percussion, so we changed the background music to percussion or something like that, right? Oh, there's a jet going off outside my apartment. That's one of the problems with recording my videos is I get a lot of ambient noise and I have to do a lot of retakes. Anyway, so what kind of game would best fit having leitmotifs? Is it possible to use them in any type of game? I feel like it is possible to use them in any type of game. Because really video games are to film what film was to the stage and what the stage was to a book. You know, it's just like the next evolution of storytelling. And the fact that nobody's really taking advantage of that is really bumming me out. Really, really, really bumming me out. So that's kind of like the one problem and why I put out videos so infrequently is because I'm still hunting to find something that's got a really good musical system. You know, and then everybody says just do Lord of the Rings. I'd love to do Lord of the Rings, but it is massive. It would be like a 9 video part series. Each one would be like half an hour. It would have to be like 3 videos per movie. But apparently it's got a really good leitmotif system. I don't know. I might do it. I might do that. I might make it happen. That's not a bad idea, actually. I might give that a swing. All right, let's go on to the next question. Claratan, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce you guys' names. Would you ever consider doing an analysis of musicals? Ooh, I'm sure there's a lot of theory and interesting history to cover there. I've tried to do a video on musicals multiple times. I've tried a lot. I've tried constantly trying to figure out like what makes a musical, what gives a musical that sound. Because the one thing I don't think a lot of people realize is that everything that happens in popular media, in pop culture, that is successful, musically speaking, almost always has some sort of direct connection to musicals. It's kind of amazing. Like I made one video talking about how Mel Brooks reinvigorated musicals, and that's why for Frozen they hired people from the musical scene. That whole video is basically wrong. Like it's not 100% wrong, but it's very short-sighted. Like as for the history of musicals, it started back in vaudeville, and the whole idea was that during the Great Depression, whenever there's any kind of financial recession or financial troubles, the arts are the first to go. So the National Endowment for the Arts has been struggling. But, you compare that to the 90s when economically we were doing pretty well, and most musicians would make their money using grants from the government. So during the Great Depression, when people couldn't afford food, if you're going to put on a show, it has to be really good, has to be really fast, and it has to be really cheap. So people, like, it wasn't just singing anymore. It was singing and dancing while doing magic tricks in a costume on a unicycle. It turned everything up to 11. It's like, if people are only going to be able to see one show a year, we have to make sure that our show is the absolute best show. So you have this like one-man circus on stage, which is what vaudeville was. The big boom for musicals was with Rodgers and Hammerstein and all their musicals, which if you Google them, I can't list any of them off the top of my head. I just know that they were huge. I think not Oklahoma. Was Oklahoma one of them? I would Google it, but I don't want to be, I'll just Google it. Because I know Rodgers and Hammerstein is kind of like the big people. Rodgers and Hammer. Oh, there we go. Yeah, Rodgers and Hammerstein. They were kind of like the big ones. Broadway musicals in the 40s and 50s, right? Because the World Wars really just put a halt on everything. Oklahoma, Carousel, South Pacific, The King and I, and The Sound of Music. Yeah, huge. Oh, they have a Pulitzer. Okay, yeah, perfect. But those guys really, they kind of solidified the sound of musicals. What makes a musical sound like a musical? And I've done everything I can to try and break down what that is, but it just seems to be some form of jazz. I'll probably end up having to do a video on that. But after Rodgers and Hammerstein, you get Bernstein with West Side Story, and everybody loves that. And when I say everybody, I don't just mean like people, but like professors. My composition professor loved West Side Story, and a lot of academics that I talked to look at West Side Story like a high academic piece of like high art concert music almost, like on the level with opera, which is interesting because I've never understood it. There are a lot of rumors that I've heard about it, like the critical interval in each of the tunes in West Side Story increases. So the first tune has like a major second, and then the next tune has a major third, and then the next tune has a perfect fourth, and then Maria is a tritone. Maria, right? That's a tritone because it's halfway through the movie or something like that. Yeah, and then there's somewhere which has that, like, what is it, a minor seventh, I think. It's like as the story progresses, the intervals increase in the pieces, but I don't think I was able to confirm that. And then apparently there's one motif that continues in every single tune. It's the Jets da 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 da, right? Apparently that makes an appearance in every single tune, but everybody loves West Side Story, and I haven't been able to figure it out. That's kind of one of those enigmatic pieces that I need to kind of break open and figure out why people like it. I might actually do a video on West Side Story. That's a good idea. I'm gonna write this down. But yeah, oh, no. Sorry, I was talking about West Side Story. So West Side Story. Then, but like while this is all going on, Disney figured this out. And I don't know if Disney figured this out on purpose or if this is like just what was popular. Yeah, like I don't know if Disney was just like the one who figured this out, but if you look at those old like 1950s movies like Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Cinderella, a lot of their songs are kind of emblematic of those musical styles, the Rodgers and Hammerstein styles. I don't know if it's just like what was popular and what was musical back then or what, because that's kind of when you started seeing the rise of rock and roll and like Elvis Presley. But Disney latched onto that. And then during the Disney Renaissance in the 80s, or late 70s, 80s, I want to say 80s. 80s, with things like The Little Mermaid, Hunchback of Notre Dame. With The Little Mermaid specifically, I know it's with The Little Mermaid. They had a guy called Alan Menken, who, if I'm not mistaken, actually wrote The Little Shop of Horrors. And he did a bunch of other movies, but I think he also did like Tangled. Yeah, and I think he worked on like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and a lot of those old Disney things. But he started on Broadway. And so he brought that Broadway sound in. And then when you look at Frozen, they brought the Frozen team on, who also did Moana. And so again, musicals. So when you look at Disney's success, it's really they're bringing the musical to the home or to like the movie theater, depending on how you look at it. But it goes beyond Disney. Like you look at Wicked, right? Wicked's crazy popular, again, musical. Avenue Q is crazy popular, again, musical. But the thing that gets me is that when you look at like kids shows, like cartoons, the ones that have the most successful pieces of music are almost always directly related to musicals. Like you look at My Little Pony, the connections between My Little Pony and some just like standard American musicals are kind of striking. There are a couple videos out there, or at least there's one video out there that I saw that directly compared My Little Pony to musicals. And this whole thing reminds me of the Deadpool 2 joke where, do you want to build a snowman? Sounds like, Papa, can you hear me? Right? It's the same. And that's why it's so popular. And it's interesting when you look at My Little Pony, because you compare that to something like Teen Titans, and Teen Titans has tried to go for more of like a pop track. Like some of the characters will have like electronic music, or it won't necessarily be like musical styled. And I don't see any remixes of Teen Titan music, but I do see a lot of remixes of My Little Pony music. I don't know if that's related or if it's because of the freakish popularity of My Little Pony among the neckbeards online. But yeah, musicals have a really wide reach. And I think one of the aspects of musicals that are the most fascinating to me is that nobody really picks up on the fact that they're listening to a musical. Like when you're watching Moana, you don't think, oh yeah, no, this is just a musical. You think, oh, this is a Disney movie, right? When you're watching Tangled or Frozen, it's not, oh, this is a musical that's just animated. You're thinking, oh, this is a Disney movie. This is something different. One thing I'd really like to do is I'd really like to, like, this is going to sound stupid, I'd really like to go to Disneyland and see what they do there, because I want to know how deep this goes, like how conscious they are of what kind of music they're using and where, because if they break it out at Disneyland, it's kind of like, you're trying to make a musical real, and that's the whole point of Disneyland, or something like that. But yeah, musicals are really interesting. Haven't been able to figure out what makes them the way they are, but yeah. It's definitely an interesting topic. All right, that's it. Those are all the questions I got. Thank you so much. I'm thinking about making this a monthly thing. I don't know. I might not. I haven't figured it out yet. Let me know. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate all the support. I literally could not pay my rent without you. So thank you so much, and have a nice day.